All right, guys. Lots of talk in the group me chat about the practice squad rule yesterday, and it was very great conversation, and it shows you what a great league this is. Just want to give you my thoughts on the video because it's hard for me to type. And so talking for me is just easier, and I'll give you a background on the rules, so it'll be easier for the league managers and Jesse especially to help understand the context of the rule and how it was implemented in Legacy, just to remind everybody. And I think, Jesse and the other league managers are doing a great job. I want to thank them for everything that they're doing here at Legacy. It's really one of the best leagues around, and a great passionate discussion yesterday in the group meet chat on the practice squad goes to show you how serious of a league Legacy is, and the dedication that many GMs have for such a, for a free league. I got to tell you, Legacy is just a wonderful league. And we shall be proud and happy and really privileged to be part of this league. Again, to be led by Jesse and a few others that helped Jesse out. We're really lucky. So let's remember the practice squad rule was implemented about a year or two before I handed the league over to Jesse. And it was a rule that was never really completed in sort of the totality of my vision of how I wanted the rule to play out. It was a rule passed in my mind with steps and processes in mind, because as I said so many times before, as a commissioner, oftentimes what your vision may be for your league and what other league members think of the league and where the league should go oftentimes will differ. Having 32 GMs all with different opinions sometimes can be conflicting. And oftentimes I've seen this not just in Legacy, but in other leagues, a commissioner may have an idea or be leading the league in one direction, and he puts a new rule proposal up for a vote, and the league rejects it. Some people don't have a vested interest in the particular rule because of their playing style, or some may just have an inherent bias against it because they don't feel it benefits them, because these leagues can all be managed, and teams and organizations can be run very differently, and certain rules apply to some GMs that run their teams one way, and certain rules won't apply to other GMs that run them the other way. Practice squad seems to be one of those, because not everybody is invested in a practice squad, because a lot of people just run their rosters as thin as can be, or they just don't care about what the practice squad actually offers. Now, in Legacy, while I did look at other rules when I was implementing the practice squad a few years back, my idea was more to develop it into a farm team system, kind of something like we have in Major League Baseball. I always envisioned a smaller roster, maybe 45 players on the active roster, which I think is plenty. Some people would actually argue that's a little high. With a practice squad, probably in about the 12 range, right? Where players would have to be in the league 3 years or less. And also I envisioned the possibility of possibly poaching, and the possibility of a scaled down salary for players, maybe not full salary, but maybe something like 50% salary is what I envision, because I believe that's how Major League Baseball runs their minor league teams. It's like a portion of the salary for the player is paid by the minor league team, and the other portion to the MLB team, the professional team, that whose rights whose ever minor league team belongs to in the major leagues. I think for me at the time, that was kind of my vision, and there was a few things about this that I liked, at least. Obviously, cutting down roster to hopefully leave bigger pool of veteran players for injuries. Now, obviously, we went from 53 and 0 practice squad players to 48 8 practice squad players. So when you do the math, you remove 5 active day rosters from 32 teams. That's roughly 150 less potentially veteran players on the board. Now, I also realize not everybody keeps 53 players on their roster. So in many ways, reducing 53 to 48 wasn't going to do much to sort of alleviate that pool of veterans. But in theory, it reduced the league veteran minimum roster by 150 something there, roughly, which is still a pretty good start. Getting down to 48, 45 active players, or even 44 or 42, whatever it may be, would again make that pool of veteran players a little bit more, there'll be something there. Hopefully, it won't be much, don't get me wrong. But even if you need a flex player toward the end of the year, like a defensive tackle or corner, you should be able to find one. Where in past years, free agency was really raped of any real talent on the board there. And that was part of the idea, is simply to open up the veteran pool a little bit. I think to really have a serious implication on having a few more veterans possibly on the waiver wire throughout the year, we probably have to get down to closer to 44, if not 42 players. And of course, with the bigger practice squad. So that was one of the ideas behind it. The other idea, of course, was possibly poaching players. I know it can be done in the NFL, though this idea was never fully conceived because, again, I was trying to pass the rule in steps. I think I tried to implement a practice squad the year before, I believe, memory serves me correct, and it was a basic bland practice squad. I believe it was voted down in Legacy. I believe this was a few years back. I don't remember now. And so the way I passed the current rule at 48 and 8 was to give GMs a little benefit. Instead of 53 man roster and 0 practice squad, I did 48 and 8, which actually gave us 3 more roster spots, right? Dropping the sort of the game time or the regular roster down to 48, but adding 8 practice squad players. It gave the league actually a little bit bigger roster, and therefore I got it to pass. As far as the poaching and the salary aspect of it, whether we wanted to have a reduced salary for practice squad players, I didn't push on those because I just wanted to get a basic baseline practice squad rule passed right at the time, and we did that, right? Because every GM has their own ideas what they want to do. So, like I said, some people like the practice squad, some people see no absolute need for it. Now, in retrospect, after the rule needed to be updated and formulated to have a greater meaning and purpose to it. Though I think it has a purpose now. I enjoy practice squads. Primarily, I just like the structure of a practice squad, players that are insignificant being off the main roster, being on a practice squad just for sheer optics, if for anything else. But also remember, we did increase the practice squad by 3 players, and also again increasing the available pool of veteran players. The question is, how much further can we go with the practice squad? Is the poaching rule a reality? Can it be done in a fair way? That's one question. What about salaries of practice squad players? I know over in real NFL, Blaine has a rule with a 10-man practice squad and a 50% cap hit for salaried players, which I like, actually. I think the 50% rule works, which is nice. You keep a player on your practice squad, he's a 50% of your salary, of the salary on the books. But once you promote him, you got to pay him the full salary. So this sets up a bunch of different scenarios. Obviously, it would encourage drafting and developing youth, which is great. But it also adds an element of strategy, because in that league, I was able to move players that were in the league 3 years or less onto my practice squad and save money. My salary, it would create cap room. So, for example, if you have let's say, I don't know, a rookie you drafted in that league, It's over a $200 million league, but let's just imagine I think it's $233 million. We have rookies in that league that get paid $3 million because the scale of the rookie salary is different. But what I did, I took a rookie that was getting paid $3 million that was on my regular squad. I needed to make room, more cap room to make another transaction. I simply dropped my rookie from the regular squad down to the practice squad, opening up $1.5 million in salary cap on my regular roster. So there's a strategy there to play with cap numbers, and it's really cool. It's really neat. And, with 10 spots in that league, if you got to create salary, you got a young player that's not doing much for you, drop them to your practice squad and you open up some salary cap to make other transactions, whether that be, trying to create a trade or sign a veteran off the waiver wire, whatever it may be. It allows you to play with your cap number a little bit. Again, if he's on your practice squad, it's a 50% cap hit of his negotiated contract or league stated contract. But if he's moved up to the game time roster, you got to pay your full salary. That's the way that works. Blaine doesn't have a poaching rule. I don't believe in that league yet. And so it's just it's a place to stash young players, which is great. And I think Blaine does 45-10, which is nice because that opens up the field. Instead of 48-8, 45-10, it opens up that veteran pool a little bit more. Again, there's not a whole lot there. We would probably have to drop that if we wanted to have a little bit more significant veteran pool later on in the year for injuries. Probably drop it closer to 42. I would say I would not go lower than 42. I think that's pretty low when you consider handcuffs and things of that nature. I know I like to carry my handcuffs. A lot of GMs don't, especially at quarterbacks. There's different attitudes about handcuff players. A lot of GMs will tell you, well, listen, if I lose my starting quarterback, I figure my season is over. I've heard a lot of GMs say that. That's not my philosophy, especially here in Legacy, considering I dealt with Aaron Rodgers and Tannehill and a bunch of other quarterbacks who all got hurt, and I made playoff runs with my handcuff quarterbacks. I believe it can be done. I've done it myself. And so I like to carry handcuffs, and those usually take up 1 or 2 spots, or if you want to experiment with another quarterback. I think there should be some roster flexibility. I think 42 or 44 even gives us plenty of flexibility. Going down to 40 really reduces that a lot, in my opinion. And also, it's just a drastic move. Going from 48 down to 40, right? I would probably do in the steps, 44, 42. We'll debate it there. But that's just my opinion, right? We could all discuss it. Maybe 40's the right number. So, all that being said is, let's remember in Legacy, when Jesse took over the league, the rule was it was a basic vanilla, kind of rule for practice squad that needed to be modified, that needed to be made more perfected, I guess you could say. For my part, the rule works right now in various different ways. Granted, minimally, but it still works in my mind. I like the rule. I know I utilize practice squads in almost every league that I'm in, especially players that I'm not going to get a whole lot of time in the league currently until they develop. I think it's a fun thing. I think it's a fun place to store extra players. I think it also encourages building through the draft, where those that use the practice squad are generally going to be teams that like to draft, and so, and I understand in these leagues we have various methods of how we can build our teams. I think teams that build through the draft should be rewarded. Well, I mean, not rewarded in the sense that they're special, but in the sense that they should have the ability to stash these players in different leagues. So it just depends how we want to do it. We currently at 48-8 in Legacy. That's 56 players we're able to hold. So the question is, I think the first question is practice squad, do we want to reduce the overall number? Because if we do something like a 42-12, now we're going from 58 spots to 54 already. If we were to go to 40 spots, now we're down from 58 down to 52. We're really reducing the number of positions, roster spots that can be held in the league that has been holding 58, right? And how do GMs feel about that? Obviously, the easiest transition would probably to make a big practice squad. I mean, even if you did like let's see, we're doing 56, 44 and 12 would keep the roster spots the same, the number of overall roster spots. Obviously, how we structure our rosters with, the game time roster versus the practice squad would be different. You would have to have more players on your roster to have 3 years or less, but still 44 and 12 seems to me a fair balance to start with. That still leaves plenty of roster spots for your game day rosters and a nice size practice squad. If people wanted to do, let's say, 42 and 10, like I've heard, that's fine too. I wouldn't have too much of a problem. But remember, that's a total squad size of 52 versus 56. We've just taken 4 overall roster spots away from all the GMs. Do we want to take that many roster spots away all at once, which would be 4, right? So in summary, again, the rule was conceived with the idea that it would be reformed gradually over time, these little added dimensions. And I think it was a great conversation that we had in a group me chat. I just want to give you guys' thoughts, my opinions on it, just in general. I really am not here to dictate where to go with the rule. Just want to give you history and in a particular context and maybe some general feelings about what I think about it. Everybody has a right to their own opinion on it, and we can vote on it. Obviously, Jesse, the leader of the league, will guide us at some point with that. But it's a rule that I've come to appreciate a lot over the past few years, especially because I've changed my style in some of these 32 team format teams. I know for me, I've gotten more into drafting the last 3 to 5 years that I really appreciate, and developing talent. And I appreciate having the extra spots to be able to hold on to younger players. I know I've experienced players that I drafted oftentimes take a few years to develop. How long you should hold on to a player before he develops. My general rule is about 3 years. If he doesn't develop by 3 years, though I've seen players develop 4 or 5 years into the league. One guy that comes off the top of my head is Delaney Walker, the good tight end there for the Titans for years. That guy really didn't start playing ball till his like 6th, 7th year, and all of a sudden he became one of the top tight ends. There's a few other guys that have sat on rosters 3, 4 years as a backup, and then they develop. Now obviously we have a time frame on the practice squad, which is good, 3 years or less. I think that's pretty good. But every individual GM has to decide for himself when it comes to that. So let's remember, the rule just needs to be tweaked. I think it's a great rule in the sense of that it's a basic vanilla rule that was conceived. I think we can make improvements on it. I don't know how I feel about the poaching just yet. I know it's part of my idea. I guess because I haven't thought of a solid rule and how that should take place, whether there should be compensation or not for a player that's poached off a roster. I'm not sure how the NFL rule works, actually. I don't think there's compensation for that. So we would just have to figure that out. I know some people have expressed not being too happy about the salary discounts. Again, that's preference, how we want to treat the practice squad, right? Do we want to make it more challenging? I will say, like I said earlier, what's being done at Real NFL, Blaze League, is fascinating because it allows you to play with your league salary a little bit. Now, what will make it more intriguing if in that league, if Blaine implemented a poaching rule, well, yeah, you could drop a guy from your game time roster to your practice squad to open up a little bit of cap for yourself, but then there's that risk of that player being poached. The question is, how do we form a good and just and practical poaching rule? And I'll leave that up to you fine people. So just a few thoughts. That's kind of the basic history of the practice squad rule at Legacy NFL. All right, guys, Frank, I'll talk to you later.